I rise in the dawn, and I kneel and blow, till the seed of the fire flicker and glow. And then I must scrub and bake and sweep, till stars are beginning to blink and peep. But the young lie long and dream in their bed of the matching of ribbons for bosom and head. Their day goes over in idleness. They sigh if the wind but lift up a tress, while I must work because I am old, and the seed of the fire gets feeble and cold. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway around the pavement's grey. I hear it in the deep heart's core. Another emblem there, that stormy white but seems a concentration of the sky, and like the soul it sails into the sight, and in the morning's gone no man knows why, and is so lovely that it sets to right what knowledge of its lack had set awry. So arrogantly pure, a child might think it can be murdered with a spot of ink. Sound of a stick upon the floor, a sound that somebody that toils from chair to chair. Beloved books that famous hands have bound, old marble heads, old pictures everywhere, great rooms where travelled men and children found content or joy, a last inheritor where none has reigned but lacked the name and fame, or out of folly into folly came. There was laughing and loving in the lanes at evening, handsome were the boys then, and girls were gay, but lost in Flanders by middle commanders, the lads of the village are melted away. This poetry is supported by critics who think it the poetry of the future. In my youth, I heard much of the music of the future. They attack all not of their school. The poet of an older school has named them the racketeers. Sometimes they attack Miss Edith Sitwell, who seems to me an important poet, shaped as they are by the disillusionment that followed the Great War. Among her fawns, cats, columbines, clowns, wicked fairies, into that phantasmagoria which reminds me of a ballet called The Sleeping Beauty, loved by the last of the Tsars. She interjects a nightmare horror of death and decay. I commend to you the ham-bone and the heart, the lament for Edward Blastock, as among the most tragic poems of our time. Her language is the traditional language of literature, but twisted, torn, complicated, jerked here and there by strained resemblances, unnatural contacts, forced upon her by some violence beating in her blood. some primitive obsession that civilization can no longer exorcise. I find her obscure, exasperating, delightful. I think I like her best when she seems a child, terrified and delighted by the story it is inventing. I will read you a little poem she has called Assface. But first I must explain its imagery, which has taken me a couple of minutes to puzzle out. Not because it is obscure, but because image follows image too quickly to be understood at a first hearing. I prefer to think of Assface as a personality invented by some child at a nursery window after dark. The starry heavens are the lighted bars and saloons of public houses, and the descending light is ass's milk, which makes Assface drunk. But this light is thought of the next moment as bright threads floating down in spirals to make a dress for Columbine, and the next moment after as milk squirting on the sands of the sea. One thinks of the glittering foam, a sea which brays like an ass and is covered, because it is a rough sea, by an ass's hide. Along the shore there are trees, and under these trees beavers are building Babel, and these beavers think that the noise Assface makes in his drunkenness is Cain and Abel fighting. The pretty maid is dead, in love bed as she lay, and they are off afield to work as they do every day. The poems I have read resemble in certain characteristics all modern poetry up to the Great War. The centaurs and amazons of Sturge Moor, the Tristram and Iseult of Binion's noble poem. There were always some long poems. My Deirdre, my Cuchulainn, had been written about for centuries, and our public wished for nothing else. Here and there, some young revolutionist would boast that his eyes were on the present or the future, or even denounce all poetry, back to Dante. But we were content. We wrote as men had always written. Then established things were shaken by the Great War. All civilized men had believed in progress, in a warless future, in always increasing wealth. But now influential young men began to wonder if anything could last, if anything were worth fighting for. In the third year of the war came the most revolutionary man in poetry during my lifetime, though his revolution was stylistic alone. T.S. Eliot published his first book. No romantic word or sound, nothing reminiscent, nothing in the least like the painting of Ricketts could be permitted henceforth. Poetry must resemble prose, and both must accept the vocabulary of their time, nor must there be any special subject matter. Tristram and Iseult were not a more suitable theme than Paddington railway station. The past had deceived us. Let us accept the worthless present. The morning comes to consciousness of faint stale smells of beer, from the sawdust trampled street with all its muddy feet, there that press to early coffee stands. One thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. We older writers disliked this new poetry, but were forced to admit its satiric intensity. It was in Eliot that certain revolutionary war poets, young men who felt they had been dragged away from their studies, from their pleasant life, by the blundering frenzy of old men, found the greater part of their style. They were too near their subject matter to do, as I think, work of permanent importance, but their social passion, their sense of tragedy, their modernity, have passed into young, influential poets of today. Auden, Spender, Macnish, Day-Lewis, etc. Some of these poets are communists, but even in those that are not, there is an overwhelming social bitterness. Some speak of the war, in which none were old enough to have served. I have heard them lilting at loom and belting, lasses lilting before dawn of day, but now they are silent, not gamesome and gallant, the flowers of the town are rotting away.